Good evening. My name is Professor Siobhan. I'm a world religion professor here at Seminole State College, and I also teach political science related to the Middle East. So I teach the two taboo topics in society. So I really appreciate you being here at this special occasion related to the Interfaith Dialogue for Religious Freedom. So you're going to meet the speakers in a few minutes, but first we want to, after thanking you for being here, we will let you know about some housekeeping elements. Of course, we have food for you later on, so don't forget about that, but we have restrooms available outside these doors to my left. And of course, you know, the parking lots outside if you need to get something from your car for any reason. So we're very happy that you're here at this very important topic in our nation's history. I want to show you a quick video related to the topic itself. And there'll also be a quiz that you take. It's a fun quiz. There'll be rough prizes. So make sure you pay extra attention for this just before we have our panel go through their discussion and then their dialogue on the topic itself. So we'll start with the video.
What if the government could punish you for the beliefs that were most precious to you? In Europe, for hundreds of years, nations fought wars over differences in religious faith. People were tortured and killed if they did not believe in the government-approved religion. Many future Americans left Europe seeking freedom to practice their own beliefs in Germany home. But they seldom allowed other people those same rights when they got here. Some British colonies in America granted toleration or just acceptance for other faiths. But very few allowed equality for different beliefs. Many colonies had official or established churches, such as the Puritans in Massachusetts and the Anglicans in Virginia. These colonies used the power of the government to punish those of different faiths. But in 1636, Rhode Island became the first colony to protect true freedom for all beliefs, or none at all. In Virginia, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison fought for religious freedom, writing a law to protect it in 1786. The U.S. Constitution also helped protect religious liberty in 1787 by banning religious tests for federal office. Madison included freedom of conscience, the right to believe or not believe as you saw fit, when he drafted the Bill of Rights in 1789. And in 1790, President George Washington told a Jewish congregation in Rhode Island that the new government would give to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no resistance. The very first part of the First Amendment protects freedom of religion. Way. First, it forbids the government to establish or sponsor religious faith, which is known as the Establishment Clause. The United States was the first nation that did not require an official religion. Second, the First Amendment protects the right of people to practice their faith through the Free Exercise Clause. Like all rights, even this one has limits. For example, human sacrifice violates the law of murder, and it cannot be excused because of religion. However, the government may not pass laws that target religious. In Florida, several towns banned animal sacrifice for rituals, such as in the Santeria religion, but the Supreme Court struck the laws down for violating free exercise. The First Amendment forbids government to support or punish religious beliefs. And because of that, America is one of the most religious nations in the West. How might life be different for you without freedom of religion?
All right, so that's our topic for today. It's really important to know about our history. So if you want to pull out your phones, we're going to start a quiz. This is a fun quiz, so there's no grade. You're actually going to get a gift certificate, gift card for the first, second, and third place. So this is actually the only time I allow my students to have their cell phones out. So this is a privilege for them. Everybody ready?
Nope, it's not loading. But yeah.
It's not loading. Hopefully we won't crash this. Still loading?
I got through, I don't know.
Anybody still loading? Who's playing? You guys ready? Thumbs up when you're ready. Okay, looks like most of them. Everybody still struggling. All right, so we're gonna get started. Yeah, you can join Rabbi as it starts. Okay. Here we go. I'm gonna read the question, just for more clarity. Okay, so I'll read our players. So the first question is, religious acceptance was unanimous in the early colonies. True or false? Daniel, if you can kill those lights just for a second so they can see better. Just in the front.
The questions are not lining up.
They go in a random order.
Yeah, it's
Random order, okay,
it's self-based.
okay, good.
Want me to go to the one?
Very good. See it better? So the second question, which two colonies had established official churches? Third question, what colony was the first to protect true freedom for all beliefs? If we're going too fast, let us know. Thomas Jefferson and blank fought for religious freedom in Virginia. Number 5, how did the US Constitution help protect religious liberty in 1787? Number 6, James Madison did not include freedom of conscience into the Bill of Rights. Is that true or false? You guys doing okay so far? Everybody's concentrating. It's great. Number 7, which of the following has
Just
told a Jewish congregation in Rhode Island that the government would give to bigotry, no sanction, to persecution, no assistance? Number 8, the US government cannot sponsor any religious faith within the borders of the nation. Number 9, in Florida, what practice was banned by various towns that was later lifted and allowed by the Supreme Court? Number 10, what was the first nation that did not require an official religion? Number 11, the First Amendment was able to remove any and all limits to ensure all religious practices were acceptable in America. True or false? Number 12, what was the religious group that had an established church within the colony of Massachusetts? That is the last question, number 12. We're all good? Anybody still taking the quiz? So thumbs up if you're done with the quiz. Thumbs down if you're still working on it. Looks like everybody's done. All right, so let's see the leaders board.
Just missed it.
All right, number 3, third place is Jared. Second place is Garrett, and first is Jim. All right, let's give them a round of applause. So we're gonna give the gift cards. You have the gift cards?
I wasn't for it the whole time. I missed the last two.
No, just bring it to me. Yeah, give it to them now.
You got on. Did you make the first?
So how did you guys do? Proud of yourself? You're ashamed of yourself? It's okay, it's a fun quiz. So, Jim? Yeah, Jim, are you here? Where's Jim?
It's Jim online.
Oh, Jim Coffin, maybe.
Yeah, Jim
Yeah, so tell him we have a gift card. Okay, and it was Garrett. Garrett, let's give him a round of applause. And then who was the last person? Jerry C. Here we are. Good. All right, so don't feel bad if you did not win. There's another quiz we're gonna play at the very end. So just keep your hopes alive. So at this moment, I'm gonna invite Kayleen Strout, who is part of the LDS Church, who's joining us. She's also very active in the Commission on Religious Freedom that is co-sponsoring the activity with us here at the college and the Peace Institute. So let's give Kayleen a round of applause.
The Central Florida Commission on Religious Freedom is an organization that has members from every walk of life, many different perspectives. And we're really honored to have 4 of those members sitting on the panel tonight. So I'll introduce you. There we go. If you'll come on up our panel, we're going to let them introduce themselves here in just a moment. I have discovered in my life, and perhaps you have this as well, that oftentimes we have stereotypes in our minds when we think, oh, this person wears this label, or this person is part of that community, and that means they will all think like this, or maybe their experiences are like that. I think you'll see tonight, as we have these panelists speak and introduce themselves and talk about some different questions, individuals have a lot of different opinions that don't necessarily conform to one stereotype. And it's part of the beauty of getting to know people as individuals, that you really see how robust and beautiful and nuanced a lot of these conversations are. And when we approach these relationships as individuals and not just part of this group or part of that group, we can really be changed. So maybe just think about that as we hear them speak, right? I did want to also let you know, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions to our panelists later on. We do have, I feel like if I one direction, it goes out. Maybe I have to stand up. Okay. We have a slide. There we go. If you'd like to submit a question for our panelists, that'll happen at the end of our panel discussion. Our system has a QR code, you can scan there and get to that, or you can text it's our freedom, not freedom, just so to 22333. So if you'll text to 22333, our freedom, it'll enter you into this text system and you can submit a question as well. So with that, I'm going to have our panelists do some stuff. David, why don't we start with you and we'll kind of go down the line that way.
No, we don't want that one.
I didn't think so.
That one needs a battery. So David Williamson, that was me 10 years ago, and I looked great 10 years ago. Oh wait, the picture's gone now.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that.
It's back.
It's back. Okay. Yeah. So they asked me to take a look at my picture. Yes, I'll take that picture forever. But no, so I'm an atheist, humanist, non-religious person. I'm also agnostic, free thinker, apatheist on some days. So there's a lot of labels that I've used. As long as I can remember, religion hasn't been a part of my life. Other people have wanted it to be a part of my life, but I haven't had it as part of my life. My parents would have checked the box Christian, but didn't really raise me to be religious. I co-founded an organization 11 years ago for the separation of church and state, but we've also built it into a community group for chosen family and friends that need to get together, usually without people saying, so where do you go to church? And do you want to go with me? But I'm always grateful to be included in spaces like this, whether we're doing interfaith work or talking about religious freedom. So thanks to you for attending, whether you're here or online, and thanks to my partners on the panel for their participation as well.
Thank you, David. I'm Rabbi David Kay. I chair the Interfaith Council of Central Florida, and I am an ordained rabbi in the conservative movement. That's capital C. That doesn't have anything to do with political bent. There are people in the conservative movement who are political conservatives, and there are people who in the conservative movement who are not political conservative. I guess I would just point out that I came to the rabbinates at a later age than most of my colleagues. Actually, at a very early age, I wanted to be a rabbi. My congregational rabbi told me it would be a bad idea for me. So I didn't do it then. He was right, as a matter of fact. It would have been an absolute disaster if I had done it in my 20s. So I went out, had a whole other life, did a whole bunch of other things, and ended up back in rabbinical school at the tender age of 41. Served a congregation here in the greater Orlando area for 17 years, and retired from the pulpit 2 years ago, and have been doing this kind of work ever since. Hello. You know, I suppose, you know, what are the labels do I wear? I don't really think about it that much, but I know that there are labels that get assigned to me because of my position in the community, and just because of things that I say or do publicly. You know, a few years back, I was invited on a one-week seminar that went to Israel and the West Bank, and it was for progressive rabbis. And that was the first time I had ever been handed the label progressive. Still don't know what it means exactly, but apparently the folks who were doing that particular seminar thought it applied. So just another thing to keep in mind is the labels that we wear are sometimes the ones that other people give us, and not necessarily ones that we pick out for ourselves.
This be with you. I'm administrator. Currently, I serve as the president of the Islamic Society of Central Florida, here in Greater Central Florida, and I've been in the community since '93. There's not much else to share with you. I have worked with both David and with my colleague, Dr. Hunter, on the Interfaith Council for many years. And I'm very proud of the work we do and support everything, all the initiatives that bring us together. A few years back, we started working on the Commission on Religious Freedom and events and prominent speakers like ambassadors, U.S. ambassadors for religious freedom to Central Florida to share with us their experiences from the world. And despite what we see here in the community and in this country, this is still the greatest country when it comes to religious freedom compared to most other countries in the world. But we can make it better, and we want to keep it this way. And it's not too early to bring young people to learn about religious freedom, and so they will go back stronger in their country and what it stands for.
I'm Joel Hunter. I've been a pastor for 55 years, and I'm an evangelical Christian, though that may not bring up accurate picture of me in your mind. I am very conservative theologically. I believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But I came into the ministry through the civil rights movement. So I'm very progressive social. And as convinced as I am, and as inseparable from Jesus Christ as I am, these are my friends, and we have been doing this community a lot of good for a lot of years, and we're gonna continue doing that. So I have absolutely no need to control what your faith is. I just gotta try to live out my faith, and I love times like this when I can learn other people's perspectives, thrive on that. All truth is God's truth. So anyhow, it's fun to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you so much. So in our introductory video that we watched a little while ago, it talked about the two parts of religious freedom in terms of law here in the United States. Non-establishment, which means there isn't a national religion that is supported by a government, unlike in a lot of countries, and also free exercise of religion. Those two parts are what we're going to focus on here in this next question. So my question to the panelists are, what are the social and political advantages of having those two parts, a non-establishment and guaranteeing free exercise? Why is it advantageous to our country to have both of those things in action? So maybe we'll go on to Joel, I'm sorry, can I put you on the spot to start with that first? Okay.
I'll be glad to speak with that. First of all, I love the balance here. The non-establishment clause keeps us from coercing people into our beliefs. It says in the Quran, it's okay if I quote the Quran, there's no coercion in religion. And so you can't argue someone into faith. You can't manipulate or force, even though that's been tried historically, into your particular faith. That's not faith. That's just yielding to force. So I love the non-establishment clause, but of course I love even more the free exercise clause, and that is, that means I can, as long as I'm not trying to manipulate or force someone else into what I believe, I'm free to be very vocal. I'm free to be very active in my faith. My faith happens to believe that I do you as much good as I do myself. Love your neighbors, you love yourself. And so I can do that because of my faith. But the free exercise portion of that, all of us have traveled extensively. And we have seen countries where religious persecution was right, and it was traditional, and it's horrible. And so I'm so thankful to be living in a country where free exercise is the rule of the day.
Thank you. Imam Mashri, you would continue.
So yeah, to come from a faith where religious freedom is baked into the scripture in several chapters in the Quran. God says first, like the verse we quoted in chapter 2, verse 256, that there is no compulsion to religion. And also in chapter 18, verse 29, where he says, let those who want to believe, believe, and those who don't want to believe, not to believe. So that is okay with God. It should be okay with us. In fact, in chapter 10, verse 99, he says, if God wanted, he could make everybody believe. But obviously God didn't want that. He wanted people to choose to believe what they were doing. However, for so many people in so many countries for centuries, that wasn't acceptable what God wanted. They wanted everybody to believe what they believe. And sometimes, even if you say, I am of your faith, you say, no, you don't believe exactly like I do. So you're not good enough. And there is infighting within the same religious groups. And that caused humans a lot of suffering over the centuries. So when The government establishes, puts it in the Constitution, that you practice whatever you want. There's freedom of conscience. That is valuable. Look at what's happening in China, what's happening in India, what's happening in so many countries. That's not an option. So we are lucky to have it. We are fortunate that the founding fathers saw great value in this, to place it in the Constitution. That's what made this country the greatest country on earth. And for the government not to establish a religion, is probably more important, because in many countries, they say, we'll give you religious freedom, but we have religion for the state. And so when you go against, or you don't practice what they're doing, you are going against the state. You're in trouble. And that's why sometimes when people say this is a Christian country, I say Christian majority, maybe, but it's a Christian country. The founding fathers didn't define it, or a Muslim country, or a Jewish country, or anything. So there's a big difference between those two statements. The country does not have an official religion. They meant it that way.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Well, a quick thought experiment for everybody who's here. Think of a group that you belong to. There is your denomination, faith tradition, your free thought community, your bowling team. Thank you. Your family, whatever it happens to be. And by show of hands, how many people here would say that every single individual who is in that group, whatever it was that you're thinking of, believes and thinks and has attitudes and opinions that are exactly the same? Yeah, okay. Trick question, obviously. So diversity is the natural state of human beings. That's true in the sacred text of my tradition that says we are all created in the divine image, which means that if we accept, as my tradition does, that God is infinite, that means that the images of God, so to speak, the way that human beings can play out, reflecting that image has to be infinite. So diversity is natural from the biblical perspective. And my undergraduate degree happens to be from the Department of Ecology, Ethology, and Evolution at the University of Illinois. That department doesn't exist anymore, but it did back then. And so I studied natural selection and evolution in some depth for those 4 years. It was only 4, got through it 4. I will say that is the natural and really the healthiest state for any species, is to be diverse. So if diversity is the natural way of the world, and we are a thinking being, we are an intellectual being, then our perspective and our opinions and the way that we think about stuff is going to be infinitely varied. That's a good thing. It's the way it's supposed to be. And from a theological perspective, that reflects the infinite nature of the divine. What are the social and political advantages of having both the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause? It allows what's natural and what's healthiest to play out in day-to-day life in this country. I endorse everything my colleagues have said. And I'm also going to endorse almost everything that David's about to say.
All right, so
I'll be sure to judge it.
it's a blank check. So we will not be free to practice our own tradition. Let's call it the faith tradition for now. In the First Amendment, right? We're talking about the Free Exercise Clause and the Non-Establishment Clause, which is a great name. We will never be free to practice our own religion if the government tells us, hey, what about this one? This one's pretty great. You should do this one too. Or not too, but instead. We usually forget the first clause. We talk a lot about, free exercise, and I get that it's your favorite, Joel. I could guess that. But, if the government told you that we're gonna, give money to the mosque and you're gonna be a Muslim, then, you know, otherwise you're not gonna have the advantages of, you know, privilege, then that would be a problem. And that's what we want to make sure we're not doing, is it advantaging any one sect. But it's no surprise that we see elected officials who don't understand that the free exercise clause and the establishment clause don't restrict people. They restrict the government, right? They are preventing the government from doing things that privilege and establish religion, and they're doing things that prevent free exercise. So just like free speech, you have rights to free speech, and you are not subject to having those impinged on by other people. You can stop people from speaking on your property, but the government can't stop you from speaking in most cases on government property. And the same with religion. The government is restricted by that First Amendment. It does not apply to people. So the advantages are that we are not free unless we have that government that is also free from religion as well. And it is true that this is probably the best country when it comes to religious freedom. And I would agree with the Imam on that because of these two fundamental rights, and the first of which is the non-establishment clause.
Quickly, it pertains.
You can submit your question. We are gonna go back to all the questions, so if you don't mind, I'd love that. So let's talk a little bit about that idea of religious freedom being absolute, or does my rights sort of end where your rights start? I'd love to kind of explore that a little bit. Maybe David, can we have you start, or I'm gonna mix you all up, so you'll never know who gets to start. Sorry about that.
I'm already.
I was ready.
Yeah, so my mother of blessed memory taught me that the right to swing your arm ends at the end of the next person's nose. That's really how I understand civil rights in a very, very, very simplistic way. Is I have certain rights and I can exercise those rights up to the point where they impinge on somebody else's rights. At which points I have to restrain myself, or the law restrains. And you know the Hialeah case about animal sacrifice with the South Korea was a little bit surprising to me when that was handed down, because on the one hand, big advocate of the free exercise clause, and certainly and of the non-establishment clause, which I think is a more accurate way of describing it. But at the same time, I'm also aware that there are limitations, right? The free exercise of religion as moderated by the law of the land. So, you know, I see that in my tradition because I've been a vegetarian for as long as I can remember. But in Judaism, there's kosher slaughter. The Hebrew word is shechita, and it has to be done in a particular way. However, here in the United States, it also has to conform to government regulations. So the USDA inspects kosher slaughterhouses and says there are certain things you have to do and there are certain things that you can't do, and that mitigates the traditional the traditional religious law. Okay. So I was a little bit surprised when the government said it's okay to go ahead, or the Supreme Court said it's okay to go ahead and and slaughter animals without oversight, because that's free exercise. Perhaps the most dramatic example is what happens in the public square. And that includes any kind of, I think we're going to get to this later, but so I won't go too deeply, but any kind of public accommodation where someone is able to say, my religious belief does not permit something that you make as a personal choice. Therefore, I'm going to deny you the same kind of public service that I would allow for someone else who I agree with theologically. That's a problem. And for those of us who are in the minority religions, minority faith traditions, that's a very scary thing, because if the government backs that up with legislation and and with the courts, that really throws the door open for people to say, I disagree with you theologically because of your theology, and therefore, I'm going to deny you service.
Yvonne, could you take on?
Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. So is religion freedom absolute? Do my rights end where yours begin? What does that look like?
Well, government has a hard job to decide what is part of a particular religion or not. But we often run into these dicey decisions where the religious group says, this is part and parcel of my practice of religion. You know, some American Indian tribes, it's a form of drug. The federal government said, this is not acceptable. But it is part of the religious practice. You might not see it in the monotheistic religions as an acceptable practice, but that's what they has done for centuries, for millennia. So what we run into constantly is these weird practices that religions offer, that in my religion I may not like what you're doing, but I have no right to stop you from what you're doing. Deeper than that, the practice of some religions is totally offensive to somebody else's religion. I mean, to us, associating anyone with God is the worst sin. And to say, you know, that you have so many gods, it's literally the opposite of what we believe. But the government has to step in and say, you keep your beliefs to yourself. Right? You don't have the right to stop the others to believe that they have as many gods as they want, or none at all. And that is where the government has to play like a referee between these different religious groups. When their religious beliefs go, you know, against each other. And in terms of the practice, some people may say, well, inside that place of worship, they are doing such and such. And to me, it's very offensive. If I have no right to step on their property and stop them from what they're doing, if it is approved, if this is a sanctioned religion, the government doesn't. The government has laws, like Rabbi K just mentioned about slaughtering meat in a certain way for health reasons. And those laws are there in Islam and Christianity, Judaism, that you don't eat a dead animal, you don't just eat unhealthy food. But say if the government doesn't have laws, religion may practice something that causes public harm. And that is why religion shouldn't be absolute. There has to be limits. If it threatens the lives, what if the religion say it's part of our practice to slaughter our children? Say, well, that is why there has to be limits that abide by the general laws of the country. That all of us agree when it comes to threatening the life and well-being of individuals, that religious practice cannot be upheld.
Thank you. David Williams, I want to have you.
Yeah, so I just thought when you were mentioning that, what if someone says, I don't want to take my kid to the doctor, I want to pray? Right, there are states where that's permitted. And I don't think that it should be. I would think that we need to force people to take care of their kids. You know, I think that's something we should do, but I don't want to get too far off on the tangent. So our right to believe is absolute. We can believe anything we want, agree or disagree. Your right to act is limited. And that right to act begins to be limited once you start to infringe on the rights of the people. Simple as that. Again, I think it's important to remind us that I am not prohibited from stopping you from believing or causing you to believe. I can convince you, I can change your mind, I can try to proselytize my atheism upon you. Those things are not, I'm not limited by that. The government cannot do that. The government cannot prevent or encourage religious behavior or non-religious behavior. So it's not people that are limited by this. And this is, I think, why often I said religious or government officials and employees of government sometimes will be surprised that they can't practice their religion at work in some ways, right? And I think we're going to talk about a case study about that. There's confusion around this. The First Amendment protects the people and limits what government can do. I think that's often missed.
Thank you, Jones.
Let me kind of switch paradigms here. Let me go from the negative to the positive. I think that we missed something when we're talking about only about limitations and only about rights. I think that the real question here is, how is your faith doing someone else good, whether they believe what you believe or not? It's not just my right stops at the end of your nose. I do like that analogy. Your mother was very wise. But I think we're so caught up in a whole paradigm of rights. I have rights. And it focuses on us and what I want and what is good for me. I think that religion at its best is what is good for you. Let me give an example. I was a spiritual advisor to President Obama for 8 years, his both terms in office, and we would have these discussions. I wrote devotions for him every week and scripture, and we did these discussions. And we just quote the Bible. I mean, that's just what we do. Just like Imam quotes the Quran, and he would always challenge me by saying, "I get what you're saying, and I understand how that's right, but you've got to talk in language that benefits everyone, that everyone understands, whether they believe what you believe or not." And I thought that's so wise. And so what I want to emphasize for this portion of the questions is, wouldn't it be great to not limit ourselves to our rights? Wouldn't it be great to expand what we believe, or in David's case, what he doesn't believe, to the benefit of everybody? That's the real question. That's the real positive challenge here.
So my next question is, what does religious freedom look like in our time now? What are some of the issues that we see? How do we see this idea of not establishing a religion, but also freely being able to exercise your beliefs in the kind of public square? What are we seeing, and how do you perhaps see that impacting your community? Maybe Imam, we'll have you start.
Well, there are big questions coming up. Can we have the word of God in the pledge of allegiance? One nation under God. And we have God in our name, God we trust. And is that the government establishing some sort of religion, to say the free thought community, to the atheists out there that, you know, as a nation we believe in God, and they say no. So is that imposing on them something from the government, because this represents the government. Today we have issues in public schools where teachers have to kind of walk on eggshells, because you can't talk about God, about the Bible, they can talk about a lot of things, but when it comes to that, because they're in a public institution, they got to the point that they feel that it's a prohibited discussion. And I think that's going too far, because in schools and colleges and universities, just like we're talking now, in a free society where we think, we shouldn't be afraid of discussing anything. Right? And that discussion is different from the teacher telling everyone, all the students have to believe in this, have to believe in it. But the teacher should be able to discuss, you know, if there's God or there's not, and to allow all the students, I'm talking about young students, we do it in colleges with young students, to be able to say, well, in my family we don't, but we do, but this is our expression. And be given that ability to feel that I can express myself, express what I believe. And that being in public schools, it doesn't mean I cannot anymore practice. So David and Williamson had clearly, you can think, you should be able to think. And think if somebody else's thinking is wrong. But when it comes to that, that is where limitations can be. So today, I think as a nation, in an attempt to accommodate everybody, we start to limit the rights of certain individuals and groups, especially individuals. I understand we don't want a Muslim group going in the classroom and distributing, scripture to everybody and materials. But if, a student wants to practice his or her faith, that should be allowed to them. Take, for example, in France, school kids, like girls cannot wear the headscarf. And they said this goes against the values of the Republic. Well, France is supposed to be a free society. That you believe or not believe or whatever. Why now, if you wore the cross or the Star of David or you wore headscarf, some symbol of your faith, you're going against the state, the value of the state. And if we don't be careful, in this country, we could slip into that slowly. And therefore, we need to protect the rights of, especially since the establishment of this country, we open meetings with players, we invoke higher power, and that has been challenged by the Free Thought community and others. We say we should have that tradition continue, but we should allow other traditions who don't believe to also offer their point of view. So don't exclude and say, for the better of everyone, we're not going to have any religion. We don't want anybody to practice. That's what China is doing, or the Soviet Union did. But that didn't work. And that didn't please anyone. In the Islamic tradition, we do the opposite. We say every religious group has the right practice and to have even their own laws that accommodate the religious practice. And the US today is the leader in the world, not just economically or militarily, but in terms of our values, our ambassadors or religious freedom travel the world to tell other people, like in China or India or Burma, you can't do this, you can't do that, give people religious rights. And they say, but in your country, back home, you are infringing on rights. So we have to be very good.
Brother King, it's, so what does religious freedom look like in
our time, yeah. It's starting to look different than what I understand religious freedom to always have been. Kind of echoing something that Joel said earlier, that the emphasis is on what I can do with my religion, and expanding the boundaries of how far I can impose my religious belief. But I guess my mother would say that making contact with the next person's nose, maybe not breaking it or bloodying it, but at least making contact and saying, I get to do that because this is my right and it's my fist and it's my arm. And I know that's your nose, but your nose is getting in the way of my fist. That's a very different approach than I feel like I grew up with. Certainly a very different approach than I was taught growing up. It's something I think needs to be reclaimed by people in faith. That's as the Imam was saying, that this is my belief and that's your belief, and you're allowed to do what you do and I'm allowed to do what I do, as long as we don't infringe on each other. And I think you've heard all of us really say that this is about prior restraint or overreach by the governments, not by individuals and what they believe. True story that really happened, to use a phrase from one of my teachers in the seminary. I was standing online at Universal Studios, and I was wearing a t-shirt that had some writing on the back. And there was a guy standing behind me in the line, and he said, "Oh, are you Jewish?" And I said, yeah, I am. Seemed like kind of, usually when a conversation starts that way, it's one of two things. Either that person's like, yeah, hey, so am I, where'd you go to SICOM? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to camp? That's the other one. Or it's somebody who is wants to try and convert me. And in this case, it was the second one. And he started in with me, and I said, I'm so glad that you are so committed to your faith tradition, and good for you, be the best possible whatever denomination of Christianity you are. And now we're done, but we weren't done. And that continued until, unfortunately, it wasn't loading fast enough to get away. The ride wasn't loading fast enough. So, and I finally turned around and I said to the fellow, look, I'm just here to go to the theme park. I'm here for this ride. I really am not here for a theological conversation. And you're going to have to trust me. It's not going to work anyway. Right? And he was completely mystified. He's like, what's the problem? Why did you offend him? And I wanted to say, because your fist just reached my nose, but I really wouldn't understand that. But that was like, okay, so as far as you're concerned, you are exercising your religious freedom. And in the paradigm that David described, he's got the right to do that. I also have the right to be annoyed and tell you to leave me alone. And once we reach that point, in a polite society, anyway, that should be the end of the conversation. I told you I'm not interested, thank you, I've been polite, I've been nice, and now we're done, and that's not why I'm here. Did I have any other option? I did, none of which were within the law. But, you know, I did end up saying to him, you know, look, if you keep pushing this on me, I'm going to ask one of the cast members to move you to a different line because it's becoming unpleasant. But, you know, I mean, would that have happened? I don't know, probably not. I'll leave it at that.
David Williams.
Yeah, so that was the revisiting of the ought that Joel mentioned, right? Should we do those things to other people, or should we, you know, respect what they believe and maybe just have casual and fun conversations with them as opposed to oppressive ones like that? But, so religious freedom today is quite the mess. And I'm glad you're all here to hear and learn what's going on, but there are some things up here that you've heard that are not correct. And I think that it's important that we realize that our understanding of these things is generally not deep enough if you're not steeped in it regularly, right? Whether you're a member of clergy, whether you're a lawyer, or whether you're an activist, you still have a lot to learn when it comes to these things, and I do as well. But I would challenge you to make sure that you don't assume that everything you hear and see in the media on this issue is correct. There's a lot of good information out there. In fact, our website at the Religious Freedom Commission has several reference pages and organizations, many of which I disagree with and would consider wrong. So just take that as an example. We've agreed that those websites should be there, but they don't all agree on these things. And we're not here to convince you that one of us is right, but to make sure that you're challenging yourself to understand what this means to you and to people in your life. And I'm all about the rights because I know how those things are affecting people in the free thought community, religious minorities and others. But I certainly appreciate the conversation around how we ought to treat people, what we ought to do and what we ought not to do.
Joel, if you want to finish this question, we're just gonna move on quickly to, you're good? We're good, okay. We're gonna cut short a little bit. We have to figure out where we're supposed to stand on this. We had several questions submitted. We are running a little bit short of time, but there was a couple that I wanted to address quickly. So if we could maybe just round question, that would be great. We are not getting into any kind of theological questions, questioning what anybody can do. So I know, sorry, David. And there was one directed too, so we're gonna avoid that one. But the question here I think that is quite good is, what is the benefit of religious freedom? If you could just maybe briefly touch on it sort of in general, but just a quick last kind of thought of why is this really beneficial? Are concerned about this, and is something that we really need to protect. David Williams, and we'll go across over that way.
We don't want the government picking winners and losers when it comes to religion.
Yeah, that.
Well, we don't want genocide and massacres and inquisitions and crusades. You just have to study history to see what that is.
Again, let me go positive. Religious freedom allows me to be who I am. My scripture says it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So if I can live out a life of Christ, and I'm free to do that in the public square, that's a terrific gift. And so it's not just about not being opposed to one. It's allowing me to live the truth as I see it.
And then just our final question, is there such a thing as too much freedom? Maybe Joel will start with you and head back to David.
No.
You mean too much religious freedom?
The question is just freedom, but I think we can frame it as religious freedom.
Of course, there has to be a limit on freedom because there are numerous examples of how freedom could go overboard and, as David said, reaches to my nose. So if we do not limit freedom in a sensible way, it's bound to cause chaos. And we see it between individual freedom and groups, where one person through art or through noise of art, unfair, we walk in here with loud speaker and music, and what can we do about it? So anything without limits is gonna be a big problem.
Yeah, let me take back my answer. Obviously, if you're harming others, then that's where your freedom stops. It's the first and worst thing.
I would also make a distinction between freedom and impunity. Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of my favorite go-to sources, once said that in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Let that one cook for a while, because it takes a little unpacking. But I will just unpack one layer of it very quickly. It means that someone could be the perpetrator of something, that guy who was behind me in line. But all of us as a community, as a society, have a certain degree of responsibility of the atmosphere that we create. So yes, you have the ability to do whatever you want, but along with that ability comes needing to take responsibility for the consequences of the choices that you make.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that complete freedom is anarchy.
I appreciate your comments so much, John. Thank you so much. And I'd like to just point out, there's deep respect between these panelists. We have these kind of conversations on a regular basis, and everybody brings perspectives to the table, and they don't always agree. We all don't always agree. But what is at the underlying part of all of this is a level of respect, a level of intentionally wanting the thing that brings us together and creates. So thank you so much for being a wonderful demonstration of that. Thank you so much. Go ahead. So I'd like, sorry, there's a challenge. The next portion of our, okay, we're gonna do, let's see, yes. The next portion is kind of a little activity that we want to have you have a chance to really think through a scenario. That is something that was in the public about a year ago. There was a decision about a football coach that worked at a public school in Washington who was praying on a football field and was told not to do that and lost his job and then took that to court. And it went up through the Supreme Court, and a decision was made, just a little bit more than a year ago. We want you as individuals and sort of maybe small groups, so maybe the people that you're with along your tables together, to kind of go through a little of this and think through this, looking at different perspectives. So we have just a basic summary of the case here. Again, the case was brought by the football coach, Joseph Kennedy, against his former employer, a public school district in Bremerton, Washington, that placed him on leave after he conducted prayers on the football field when he was on the job as one of the team's coaches. The coach alleged the school district violated his right to free exercise of religion under the First Amendment. The school district alleged that as the coach, as a representative of the school, that violated the establishment clause rights of the students by engaging in prayer with them. The coach claimed his religious freedom was affected when they stopped him from praying. The school claimed the religious freedom of the students was affected by the prayers of the students. If he prayed quietly on his own without players around, should he have been stopped or allowed to continue? And if he prayed aloud with the players around, should he have been allowed to or stop? So if you could just kind of merge yourself into small groups, maybe 3 or 4, turn around, whatever, group around, maybe if you'll just kind of take those last 2 questions. The last 2 bullets. If he prayed quietly on his own without players around, should he have been allowed to continue or been stopped or the other way?
I don't know, that's.
Redirect your eyes. We've got a couple other questions here that I'd like you to consider. So what are the effects of this case? If you're the coach, if you're a student, if your beliefs don't align with the coaches, if your beliefs do align with the coaches. Take maybe 2 or 3 minutes and kind of look at it from those various perspectives to see what that conversation looks like. Go ahead, back at it.
The balance of is my one, intellect wide. I'm in November, but I'm saying, which criminal, but for traffic. But yes, as things, Constitution around they ratified 1789-ish. Okay, kind of the Bill of Rights came out. They had that the Bill of Rights. 2 years after that, everybody really did from 1779. It's 250 years, and it's still debated today over what they meant. It's a lot of lead. You can argue both ways.
Okay. Gather back together again. Thank you so much. The great thing about these kind of events is we brought together people with many different perspectives. And hopefully at your table, you heard somebody say something that maybe was different than what you automatically were thinking. That's what we want you to do, is think about this with somebody else's perspective, with some empathy, with some compassion, and think for yourself, right? Maybe not think to do, not just go with maybe the things you've heard your whole life, but get to know somebody who thinks differently, whose life experience, maybe taught them a different lesson, and then examine these kinds of issues based on something that you're learning from others as well. That's a really important part of having a critical thinking skill. So we hope that that's one of the things that you'll take away tonight, is that ability to maybe look at things in a different way. Okay. We have more with more prizes, really good gift cards. So, David. Yes. Let me do the. Oh, sorry. There is a QR code. There. Oh, not that one. No, lots of QR codes. There you go. If you would like to see a quick summary of the case and how it all turned out, there you go. Thank you, David, for reminding me.
If you don't use a QR code, you're never gonna know.
It's a mystery, right? Actually, if your QR code doesn't work, see me after and I'll give you the little summary. Right? Very good. All right, we are going to do one more little quiz. This is a little different. You're not going to know necessarily kind of some historical religious freedom activities and not activities, but happening over the years, and you're just going to make your best guess, and you're going to see how many points you can get for some really good parts. So let's go ahead and start our second quiz.
Oh, no.
So here's your QR code to join this game. We're getting it. How are we doing? Most, yes. Any trouble? Oh, I see a bunch of people joining. Excellent. I think, yeah, if you kind of need to hit it straight on from an angle, sometimes it's a little difficult. So maybe move to the center and try to take it that way if your thing isn't scanned well. Okay. So I think we have about 22 on right now. Another minute here. If you're maybe in the back and it's not working, come up a little closer, that might help your scan a little bit better. Okay. So the website is what? It's quizzes. Go ahead. Okay, thank you. And then that game code is at 45097. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start. So that just a majority of the Supreme Court justices agreed with Kennedy, coach, and said that the free exercise and free speech clause of the First Amendment protect him while engaging in personal religious observance, even on the job. The dissenting 3 justices focused their dissent on the description of the event provided by Kennedy's attorneys. They pointed to photographic evidence of the coach praying with students as to why the players should not be allowed. In other words, the Supreme Court did not agree on the facts in the case, but did decide that the coach could continue to pray privately. Just as FYI, Kennedy, the coach, returned back to the field at that school in 2023 to coach for 1 game before leaving to return to Florida, where he had established a residence after he was originally put. So now you know. Okay, are we done?
So did you learn something new today? I know the rabbi. I guess the rest is you do all of this. So this QR code, if you want to check it for us, is extended resources. It's part of what's called the Flipboard, which gives you a lot more information about the topic of religious freedom. It shows the videos we introduced to you today, but it also has other information, including the Kennedy case. If you still love to read, we still have that available for you to read the case from the Supreme Court. So at this time, we want to really thank you for being here.
Stand up next to this their religion, be a persecution for this. Said, be respectful and generous to those who choose to speak openly about their beliefs, including those who don't belong to a religion. Third, respect the desire of religious people to meet and pray and worship together, regardless of when or where they meet. Fourth, go out of your way to befriend those whose clothing and other traditions are yours. Yes, it's a big world, isn't it? Big enough for everyone to enjoy religious freedom. More ideas about our rights from the Geneva Office of Human Rights